Well, let's stick with all things Philip Lowe, seeing as it has been the big story here in Canberra over a couple of days this week. Earlier, I was joined by Labor MP Jerome Laxale, who's a member of the House Economics Committee. Jerome Laxale, welcome to Afternoon Briefing. You've been sitting in the Economics Committee this morning listening to the testimony from Phil Lowe and from his associates on the Reserve Bank board. Are you convinced by what they've had to say today?
Well, look, Phil painted a picture that inflation is something that we need to get under control and that he was doing that. Bit of questioning in regards to the impact of rate rises on renters. I know that's something that in 2 hearings now I've been asking. I'm not too satisfied with some of those answers. It doesn't seem like they're collecting the right amount of data to see what's happening. I know in my electorate in Bennelong, 40% of people rent. Across New South Wales, it's the highest form of housing tenure. And the RBA don't seem to have any data that establishes whether or not renters are being disproportionately impacted by rate rises. I think they need to do better there, and hopefully hearings like this will make them do better.
So that concern is that as more pressure is put on the actual landlords themselves and their mortgages, they're passing on that pain through the form of higher rents.
Absolutely, and we're getting that feedback. After my questioning in September, we had streams of emails and comments saying that this was the reason why their rent was going up, a direct link from higher rates to higher rents. And the Reserve Bank don't seem to be on the same page. So hopefully they can improve their methods, because my fear is that renters who perhaps are more traditionally lower income earning are having a higher impact of those rate rises on their family budgets, as opposed to mortgage holders and a third of the people who don't have a mortgage at all.
When we're talking about renters, do you think that they somewhat get overlooked in the broader commentary, not only in terms of that data collection from the RBA, but the broader commentary about the impact of rate rises?
Absolutely. I think, you've seen, we've had a journalist tweet out during the hearing saying he's never heard so much interest in the impact of rate rises on renters. And we know in cities like Sydney and Melbourne, the amount of people who rent is just growing because of housing affordability issues. So, as I said, in Bennelong it's 40%, in Parramatta it's 45%. It's the highest form in New South Wales. I think institutions like the RBA need to give them a bit more attention and understand how rate rises impact on them, just to make sure they're making the right decisions, because these decisions matter. It takes money out of family budgets at a really tough time. We know they have a job to do to keep a lid on inflation, but it'd be nice for them to provide a bit more focus on the biggest housing tenure in New South Wales.
A familiar refrain from Phil Lowe, both in your committee hearing this morning, but in his earlier appearance this week before the Senate, was that he gets quite a bit of media attention every time that there is a rate rise that is announced from the RBA. Do you think that it's justified, the sort of attention that the RBA governor has been getting over the last couple of months with 9 consecutive rate rises in a row? Is that justified, that sort of scrutiny or pressure?
I think, and this is something that the RBA review's looking into, is how the RBA communicate their decisions. I mean, we hadn't heard, up until Wednesday, we hadn't heard from the RBA since mid-December. And then, of course, we had the issue with that private lunch over a public hearing, which the governor addressed. Look, I welcome scrutiny. I'm in a job myself where I'm held to the highest account, so I don't think it's unreasonable for the RBA to improve their communication with the public at all.
What about Phil Lowe's tenure? Do you think he should remain in the role as the governor?
Well, the Treasurer said he needs to see that review, which I think is coming around. He's getting it on the 31st of March, and that'll be a decision that they make towards the middle of the year, and that's a matter for the Treasurer and Cabinet.
It seems like some of your colleagues, though, have been sharpening the figurative knives here and saying that the RBA governor and of course, the board as well, because it isn't just the RBA governor making a decision here on interest rates, but they have not been properly thinking about just how much these interest rate rises have on household budgets.
Look, I can't speak for my colleagues. It's a decision for the Treasurer. I'm concerned that the RBA, and it's not only under Governor Lowe, but under previous governors, haven't been giving renters enough of a look in, and I hope that can change in the short term.
There's a familiar refrain from Philip Lowe today, and I think he said it earlier in the week as well, that there is this discussion around whether some central banks around the world have gone too hard, or they haven't done enough, and that risk calculation there, the full impact of that, won't be seen for some time to come. How difficult do you think that makes the equation for an organisation like the RBA and then the government to work in conjunction with the central bank to try to come up with some solution to the inflation crisis?
Look, no one's doubting how difficult the situation is, and I think Governor Lowe said it's a narrow path to guide our way through this. There's a risk of going too hard, and there's a risk of not doing anything at all. So this is why I believe that the RBA needs the best available data to them. 40% of my seat rate, and they don't really know the impact of rate rises on them. So if they can improve the data they get, they'll be making better decisions. They can communicate those decisions better with the public. Then everyone might get a bit more of an understanding about how difficult this is, but also how corrosive inflation is. There's no arguments from me or anyone on the committee that inflation does need to come down. Let's just make sure we make the right decisions to get there.
Because it is an unknown, does that fuel the discussion around maybe pumping the brakes a bit now and waiting to see that effect come through?
I had a number of questions on that matter, but unfortunately I only had 10 minutes to ask them. Hopefully the Governor can address some more questions at a future date.
What's your opinion on that, though?
Well, I'd love to hear what the Governor thinks. Has he got... He's signalling that there's another 2 more rate rises in the system. That was the guidance given just very recently. I would have loved to know what he thinks, is that too much? Is it, we've just received unemployment data just recently showing that unemployment's gone up a little. It would have been lovely to see a bit more about and hear a bit more about what they had to say, but unfortunately ran out of time. I'd encourage the Governor to schedule more speeches and be more available so that the public can understand the direction going forward.
Well, Jerome